If your dog licks you, your first instinct is probably to interpret that as love, because that is what most people have been conditioned to believe, and while that interpretation is not entirely wrong, it is also far from complete, since this simple behavior carries meanings that go much deeper than affection and reveal a complex mix of instinct, emotion, and communication that most owners never stop to question. What makes this even more interesting is that licking is not a random habit, nor is it something your dog does without purpose, because behind every repetition there is a reason, and that reason is often rooted in patterns that existed long before dogs ever became part of human life, meaning that what you are seeing today is actually a modern expression of something very ancient. Long before domestication, in the structure of wild canine groups, licking played a very specific role, especially among wolves, where younger members of the pack would lick the faces of older or more dominant individuals as a way of signaling submission, respect, and social connection, often during moments of reunion or when trying to establish harmony within the group. That behavior did not disappear when dogs started living with humans, it simply adapted to a new environment, and now, instead of directing that instinct toward another dog, your dog may direct it toward you, not because it fully sees you as another animal in a pack, but because its brain still operates through those same inherited patterns that shape how it communicates. However, this is where things begin to shift, because licking is not tied to a single emotional meaning, and assuming it always represents affection can lead to serious misunderstandings, especially when the behavior becomes more intense, more frequent, or appears in situations where it does not seem to make sense at first glance. For example, when licking happens during calm, relaxed moments with soft posture and loose body movement, it often reflects comfort and bonding, but when it becomes fast, repetitive, or paired with signals like tension, avoidance, or restlessness, it may actually indicate anxiety, stress, or an attempt to regulate internal discomfort. There is also a sensory layer involved that most people completely overlook, because your skin carries salt, scent, and subtle chemical information that your dog is naturally drawn to, which means that licking is not only a form of communication, but also a way of exploring and understanding you through senses that are far more developed than your own. So when your dog licks you, it is not just expressing one feeling, it is combining instinct, perception, learned behavior, and emotional state into a single action, and the meaning of that action depends entirely on the context in which it happens and the signals that surround it. Once you begin to look at it this way, what once seemed simple starts to reveal a level of complexity that changes how you interpret even the smallest interactions, because licking stops being just a cute habit and becomes a language, one that your dog has been using all along, whether you noticed it or not. And that leads to an important question, because if licking can mean different things depending on the situation, how can you actually tell what your dog is trying to communicate in each moment? The different meanings behind licking. If you want to truly understand what your dog is communicating when it licks you, the first thing you need to shift is your focus, because the behavior alone does not carry a fixed meaning, and what really defines it is everything that surrounds that moment, including body language, timing, intensity, and the emotional tone of the situation. One of the most common interpretations is affection, but even this needs to be understood with precision, because for dogs, what looks like love is often a combination of bonding, familiarity, and positive association. Meaning your dog licks you because your presence is connected to safety, comfort, and rewarding experiences that it has learned over time. Another very common reason is greeting behavior, which is deeply rooted in social dynamics, where licking becomes part of the excitement of reconnecting, especially after a period of separation. And this is why many dogs will lick more intensely when you arrive home, often accompanied by a loose body, energetic movement, and a wide, relaxed wag of the tail. However, when the posture changes, the meaning changes with it, and this is where most people begin to misinterpret what is happening, because licking can also be a submissive signal, especially when it comes together with lowered body position, ears slightly back, slower movements, or avoidance of direct eye contact, indicating that the dog is trying to reduce tension or show deference. There is also appeasement behavior, which is subtle but extremely important to recognize, because in this case the dog is not simply reacting to hierarchy, but actively trying to calm a situation that feels uncertain or uncomfortable, which means your dog might lick you in moments when it senses tension, either in you, in the environment, or within itself. Another layer that often goes unnoticed is stress-related licking, which can easily be mistaken for affection if you are not paying close attention to the rhythm and persistence, since dogs under stress tend to lick in a more repetitive and almost compulsive way, sometimes accompanied by other signals such as yawning, pacing, or difficulty settling. There is also a learned component that develops over time, because if your dog receives attention, petting, or verbal interaction every time it licks you, it quickly understands that this behavior is an effective way to trigger a response, which reinforces the action regardless of its original meaning. What makes this complex is that these meanings are not isolated, and a single moment of licking can involve multiple emotional layers at the same time, combining excitement, mild anxiety, and bonding into one behavior that only makes sense when you look at the full context instead of isolating the action itself. At this point, the real question is no longer why your dog licks you, but what your dog is feeling when it does it, because that shift in perspective is what allows you to respond in a way that actually matches the situation instead of reacting based on assumptions. And as you start to read these signals more clearly, you begin to notice that some forms of licking are completely healthy and part of a balanced interaction, while others may be early signs that something is off, something that deserves attention before it develops into a more persistent pattern. Before we move into those less obvious signals and what they can reveal about your dog's internal state, it is worth recognizing that learning to interpret behavior at this level completely changes the relationship you have with your dog. And if this kind of understanding is valuable to you, following the channel is simply a way to continue developing that awareness over time without missing the next layers that most people never learn to see. When licking becomes a signal you should not ignore. Once you begin to understand that licking can express different emotional states, the next step is recognizing when it stops being a normal, context-based behavior and starts becoming a signal that something deeper is happening, because there is a clear difference between occasional communication and patterns that repeat in a way that suggests imbalance, discomfort, or unmet needs. One of the first signs to pay attention to is repetition without a clear trigger, where the dog continues licking even when nothing is happening around it, no interaction is taking place, and no external stimulus explains the behavior, creating the impression that the action has become automatic, almost like a loop that the dog struggles to interrupt. In these situations, licking often works as a self-soothing mechanism, meaning the dog is using the behavior to regulate internal tension or discomfort, similar to how repetitive habits appear in other species when they are trying to cope with stress. And while this may temporarily relieve the feeling, it does not address the root cause, which is why the behavior can become more frequent over time. Another important pattern is what is known as displacement behavior, which occurs when a dog experiences conflicting emotions and redirects that tension into an unrelated action, such as licking, scratching, or sniffing, and this usually appears in moments of uncertainty, pressure, or confusion, especially when the dog does not know how to respond directly to a situation. For example, if your dog starts licking excessively when you are giving commands, when unfamiliar people are present, or when the environment suddenly changes, it may not be expressing affection at all, but rather trying to cope with that uncertainty, using licking as a way to diffuse internal tension without confronting the source of discomfort. There is also a physical dimension that should not be ignored, because excessive licking directed towards specific areas, such as paws, joints, or the same spot repeatedly, can be associated with irritation, allergies, or even pain, meaning that what appears to be behavioral could actually have a physiological origin that requires attention. What makes this more complex is that many owners unintentionally reinforce these patterns, because when a dog licks excessively and receives attention, comfort, or interaction in response, it learns that the behavior produces engagement, even if the original cause was stress, which creates a cycle where the licking becomes both a symptom and a reinforced habit. This is why awareness matters, because ignoring these signals can allow mild discomfort to evolve into compulsive behavior, while reacting incorrectly can increase anxiety instead of reducing it, making it essential to interpret what is happening before deciding how to respond. Subtle details such as the speed of the licking, the tension in the body, the position of the ears, and the overall energy level often reveal more than the action itself, and once you train your attention to notice these elements, you begin to see patterns that were always present but previously invisible. At this point, licking is no longer just a behavior, it becomes a form of information, a way of reading your dog's internal state without words, and that perspective shifts your role from simply reacting to actively understanding, which is what truly strengthens communication between you and your dog. Now, the final piece is not just understanding what it means, but knowing how to respond in a way that actually helps your dog, because the way you react in these moments is what ultimately shapes whether the behavior becomes balanced or problematic over time. What you should actually do about it. Now that you understand that licking is not a single, fixed signal but a layered form of communication shaped by instinct, emotion, and context, the most important shift happens in your response, because what you do in those moments will either reinforce the behavior, redirect it, or gradually reshape how your dog chooses to communicate with you over time. When the licking appears in a calm and relaxed context with soft body language and a stable emotional tone, there is no need to interrupt it abruptly, because in those moments the behavior is part of a healthy bonding process, and allowing it in moderation can strengthen trust, reinforce a sense of safety, and maintain a positive connection between you and your dog. However, when you begin to notice signs of anxiety, repetition, or intensity, the goal is not to suppress the licking directly, but to understand and address the state behind it, which means shifting your attention away from the action itself and toward what your dog is experiencing internally, whether that is overstimulation, uncertainty, or accumulated stress. One of the most effective ways to handle this is through calm and intentional redirection, where instead of reacting impulsively or pushing your dog away, you guide it toward a different behavior that is more stable and grounded, such as asking for a simple command, offering an object to engage with, or creating a moment of structure that helps break the cycle without adding pressure. Consistency becomes essential at this stage because dogs learn through patterns, and if licking sometimes results in attention and other times leads to rejection, that inconsistency can actually increase the behavior, making it more persistent, which is why your response should always reflect what you want to reinforce in the long term rather than what feels easiest in the moment. There are also situations where adjusting the environment is more effective than correcting the behavior after it starts, especially if the licking is tied to specific triggers like unfamiliar people, excessive stimulation, or sudden changes in routine, and by reducing those triggers, you lower the need for the behavior to occur in the first place. At the same time, it is important to recognize when not to respond, because even subtle attention can reinforce habits, and in cases where licking has clearly become a way of seeking interaction, calmly withholding attention while reinforcing alternative behaviors can gradually shift how your dog communicates. Over time, this awareness transforms the interaction into something much more precise and intentional, where you are no longer reacting automatically, but responding based on understanding, reading the situation, and adjusting your behavior in a way that actually supports your dog's emotional state. And that is where everything comes together, because once you stop seeing licking as a simple sign of affection and start recognizing it as a dynamic form of communication, every interaction becomes clearer, more balanced, and more meaningful, allowing you to build a relationship that is not just based on habit, but on real understanding.